It is April 20th, 1964. The room smells of wood polish and fear. At a table below the judges, a group of men sit straight-backed, dressed in suits and ties, black men and Indian men and one white man, in a court designed to remind them every single day that they do not belong here, that this country was not built for them, that the law in this room was written by other people, for other people. The crowd is holding its breath. One man rises. He is tall, nearly 6 feet 3 inches. His shoulders are wide, his jaw set like granite. He has a lawyer's posture and a warrior's eyes. He has already confessed to organizing sabotage against his own government. He has looked these judges in the face and told them, "Yes, I built bombs." The prosecutor wants him dead. The scaffolding is ready. Half the world expects the verdict before the trial is even finished. But instead of begging, instead of explaining, instead of trembling, he speaks. For 4 hours, 4 hours, this man speaks, quietly, calmly, without a tremor in his voice. He speaks about history and pain and dignity and hope. He speaks about what it means to live in a country that tells you every single morning that you are less than human. And then when he is done, when every word has been placed carefully in the air, like stones in a wall, he says the sentence that will echo through history for the next 100 years. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The world waits. Before we go back to that courtroom, before we understand what it meant for one man to stand there and say those words, we have to go back, way back, almost a century back. We have to go to a land of green rolling hills and deep river valleys, where cattle graze on hillsides that have looked the same for 1,000 years, where red-soiled footpaths connect villages of round mud huts with thatched roofs, where children run barefoot through tall grass, and grandmothers sing songs around fires at night, and the stars are so bright you can almost touch them. This is the Transkei, the southeastern edge of what is today South Africa, and this, in 1918, is where everything begins. But first, you need to understand the world this story takes place in, because it is not a simple world. It is a world cracked in half. South Africa in 1918 is a land of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary injustice. The British Empire has spent 200 years forcing its way across this continent, fighting wars, stealing land, and rewriting rules to keep power in white hands. The Xhosa people, one of the great nations of southern Africa, a proud people with their own language, their own law, their own history stretching back centuries, have fought 9 separate wars against British colonial forces. 9 times. And 9 times they have been pushed back, their lands taken, their chiefs stripped of authority, their children told that their culture was primitive, their language was lesser, their existence was only permitted within the tight walls that colonial law had built around them. The Xhosa fought 9 separate wars against European colonial forces between 1779 and 1879. For over a century they resisted. They were never fully defeated in spirit, only in territory. By 1910, the region had been formed into the Union of South Africa, a country where the white minority, roughly 1 in 5 people, controlled all the wealth, all the land, and all the law. Black South Africans could not vote. They could not own land outside designated areas. They could not walk freely in their own country. Into this world, into this contradiction, on July 18, 1918, a boy is born. His name, the name his parents give him, the name they whisper over his sleeping face, is Rolihlahla. Say it with me, Rolihlahla. In the Xhosa language, Rolihlahla literally means pulling the branch of a tree, but in everyday speech, it means something simpler, something more human. It means troublemaker. His parents are naming him, perhaps without knowing it, for exactly what he will become. You might know him by another name, the English name a teacher gave him on his first day of school, when he was 7 years old, because African names were considered inconvenient in the colonial classroom. His English name is Nelson. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, born July 18, Mvezo, Transkei, South Africa. His clan name, the name his own people will use for him with reverence for the rest of his life, is Madiba. And this is his story. Imagine you are there. You are standing at the edge of a small village on a hillside in the Transkei. It is early morning. The air smells of wood smoke and wet grass and something earthy and alive. dung from the cattle pen, the red mud of the walls, the sweetness of wild flowers growing along the path to the stream. The village is called Mvezo. It is a cluster of round huts, each one built with smooth clay walls, a low wooden door you have to duck through, a floor swept clean by hand each morning. There are no roads in Mvezo, no electricity, no cars. The village sits in a fold of the hills like a secret. This is where Rolihlahla Mandela is born. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniswa, is a man of standing, not a king, but a chief, the head of the village, an advisor to the king of the Thembu royal house. Gadla has cattle, many cattle, and in Xhosa society, cattle is wealth, cattle is dignity, cattle is power. He has 4 wives, which is not unusual among the Xhosa of that time. Rolihlahla's mother, Nosekeni Fanny, is the 3rd wife, a gentle, devout woman who has converted to Christianity and attends the Methodist church nearby. From his earliest days, Rolihlahla lives in 2 worlds at once. The ancient world of Xhosa tradition, herding cattle at dawn, listening to elders tell the stories of his ancestors around the fire at night, learning the names of every hill and river in the surrounding land, and the creeping edge of a new world, the church bells, the missionaries, the colonial administrators who arrive on horseback and carry papers with laws written in a language no one in the village speaks. His first duty, from the age of 5, is herding cattle. He and the other boys of the village drive the herd to the fields each morning, before the sun is fully up, watch them graze through the long golden afternoon, and bring them back before dark. They race each other across the hills. They catch fish in the streams with their bare hands. They wrestle and play, and lie on their backs, looking up at skies so clear you feel you could fall into them. It is a good childhood, genuinely, honestly good. But then, when Rolihlahla is still very small, something breaks. Gadla Mandela was stripped of his chieftainship not because he broke any law, but because he refused to appear before a white colonial magistrate who had summoned him over a dispute about the ownership of an ox. In colonial South Africa, refusing a summons from a white official was considered insubordination. That single act of dignity cost Gadla everything. The magistrate had the gun and the pen and the law. Gadla had only his dignity, and in that South Africa, dignity was not enough. The family loses everything, their cattle, their title, their home in Mvezo. Gadla moves his family to a smaller village called Kunu, a scattering of huts in a valley lower down the hills. There is a stream nearby and a small school run by missionaries. The grass is still tall, the hills are still beautiful, but something has shifted. Something has been taken that cannot be returned. Age 7, Nosekeni dresses her son in his father's trousers, cut down to fit his small body, and walks him to the nearby mission school. It is his first day. His teacher, Miss Mdinganan, looks at this barefoot boy in his cut-down trousers and gives him an English name, as all the students receive English names, as if their African names are too difficult, too foreign, too inconvenient to bother with. She calls him Nelson. He wears shoes for the first time that day. They are too stiff and his feet ache by noon, but he does not complain. He sits very straight at his desk and watches everything with wide, serious eyes. On his first day of school, young Nelson had to be taught how to hold a pencil. By the time he finished his education, decades later, he had earned a law degree from one of South Africa's most prestigious universities. The pencil he learned to hold that day would eventually write words that changed a nation. His father dies. The cause is a lung ailment, possibly tuberculosis, the disease that stalks the poor in every era, the disease that punishes those who live in damp huts and breathe smoky air and have no medicine to fight back with. Gadla dies in his hut in Kunu, with his family around him. For Rolihlahla Nelson, this is not just grief, it is a door closing, a rope cut loose, the man who gave him his name, his cattle-watching duties, his place in the world, gone. But before he dies, Gadla makes one more decision, one final act of fatherhood. He sends a message to the paramount chief of the Thembu people, Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, and asks him to take the boy, to raise him, to give him the education that a chief's son deserves. Jongintaba agrees, and so Nosekeni, Nelson's mother, takes her 9-year-old son by the hand and walks. For days they walk, through valleys, over hills, past rivers, until they arrive at a place called Mahekezweni, the Great Place, the seat of Chief Jongintaba. At the entrance, Nelson turns around. His mother is already leaving. She does not look back. She cannot. She is walking back to Kunu alone. Nelson stands there, 9 years old, everything he has ever known walking away from him, and everything he is about to become waiting just beyond that gate. He had lost his father and his home. Now he was about to gain something else entirely, a front-row seat to power. And what he saw there would shape everything. The great place is not what a 9-year-old boy from Kunu would expect. There is electricity here, not everywhere, but in the main house, running from a small generator that hums and clanks in a shed out back. There is a Ford motor car, one of the only ones in the entire district. Nelson has never seen an automobile before. He will spend whole afternoons just staring at it, walking around it, touching its metal skin when no one is watching. Chief Jongintaba's Ford V8 was the talk of the entire Transkei. For miles around, people would travel just to catch a glimpse of it. Young Nelson, who had only ever seen horses and cattle for transportation, was completely transfixed. He later described the car as looking like a creature from another world. Chief Jongintaba raises Nelson alongside his own son Justice, who is 4 years older. They sleep in the same hut. They eat the same food. They do the same chores. Nelson is not treated as a charity case. He is part of the household, and the household has expectations. He attends the mission school at Mahekazweni. He excels in English and history. He loves history, loves the way a long story can explain how the world became what it is. He takes up running. He competes in cross-country races with his long, angular legs pumping up the hillsides. He is not always easy. He can be proud, a little stubborn, quick to feel slighted, but he learns, slowly, to hold himself with a certain stillness. And then there are the meetings. Imagine you are sitting at the edge of a circle of men. You are young, 10, 12, 14 years old, and you have been allowed to sit here only because you are quiet and still, and everyone knows you are the chief's ward. The men around you are elders of the Thembu people, counselors, farmers, ordinary villagers who have walked for hours to be heard. The chief sits at the edge of the circle. He does not sit at the center. He does not tower over anyone. One by one, the people speak. Some are angry, some are afraid, some disagree with each other loudly and passionately. Jongintaba never interrupts. He never rolls his eyes or dismisses anyone. He listens, really listens, with his whole body, with his eyes on the speaker's face, to every single voice, including the ones he disagrees with. Only at the very end, when everyone has spoken, does he speak, and when he does, his voice is quiet. He draws together the threads of everything that has been said. He finds the place where people agree, even if they don't know it yet. He builds a consensus, a decision that everyone can live with, even if no one got everything they wanted. Nelson watches this. Again and again, he watches this. He does not fully understand what he is seeing yet. It will take him decades to understand it completely, but the lesson is lodging itself somewhere deep inside him. Somewhere it will wait patiently until it is needed. Leadership is not shouting, it is listening. Real power does not demand agreement. It earns it. Age 16, the circumcision ceremony. The Ulwaluko, the Xhosa initiation ceremony, is the passage from boyhood to manhood. It is not a party. It is not a celebration exactly. It is serious, solemn, painful. In traditional Xhosa culture, a male who has not undergone Ulwaluko is still considered a boy, regardless of age. No man, no land, no cattle, no place in council. Nelson undergoes the ceremony along with other boys his age. The operation, circumcision, performed with a traditional instrument without anesthetic, is severe. He feels ashamed afterward for having flinched at the moment of the cut. He tells himself that shame is the wrong response. He files it away as a lesson about pain. You endure it. You do not show it. You move forward. At the ceremony that follows, an elder called Chief Melekile rises to speak. He looks at these young men, newly made men, wrapped in blankets, faces still painted with white clay, and his voice carries something heavy, something true. He says, "We are a conquered people. We are slaves in our own land. These young men will spend their lives breaking their backs in the mines of white men, so that white men may live in luxury." The other elders shift uncomfortably. This is not the usual celebratory speech. But Nelson hears it, really hears it, lodged in him like a splinter, the way the truth does when you are not yet ready to do anything about it. His initiation name, given to him at this ceremony, is Dalabhanga, Maker of Parliaments. He does not yet know how prophetic this is. He is sent to Clarkberry Boarding Institute in 1933, then to the Methodist College at Healdtown. These are prestigious schools, British-style institutions where African boys learn Latin and English literature and proper table manners and Victorian codes of conduct. The curriculum tells them that European civilization is the summit of human achievement. The uniforms tell them to leave their own culture outside the gate. Nelson absorbs what is useful and notices what is missing. He takes up boxing. He loves the discipline of it, the training, the footwork, the calm required to think clearly when someone is trying to hit you in the head. He runs long distances. He is not the most brilliantly gifted student in the room, but he works harder than almost everyone. He reads late into the night by candlelight when others are sleeping. He is determined, absolutely unshakably determined. He was being given the best education colonialism could offer, but the world he was preparing to enter was about to show him something no textbook had mentioned, how deep the cruelty could go. Nelson Mandela, 21 years old, wearing his first proper suit, heart hammering with something between pride and terror, walks through the gates of the University of Fort Hare. Fort Hare is the only university in all of southern Africa that admits black students. It educates leaders from across the continent, from what is now Zambia, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Nigeria. To attend Fort Hare is to be part of an elite. It means you are going somewhere. It means the world, despite everything, has a place for you. Nelson studies English, politics, and Roman Dutch law. He wants to become a court interpreter, a respectable position, steady work, the highest realistic ambition a black South African could hold without someone pulling the floor out from under him. He meets Oliver Tambo, quiet, serious, intellectually sharp, a man who says little but means everything he says. They teach Sunday school together on weekends and debate politics between lectures. Nelson does not know it yet, but Oliver Tambo will be one of the most important people in his entire life. His brother, his partner, his anchor when everything is falling apart. 1940, a dispute over food. The university serves bad meals. The students are fed poorly and resent it. They organize, boycotting the Student Representative Council elections to protest administration overreach. Nelson is elected to the council anyway. He refuses to take his seat. He will not be on a council that his fellow students have rejected. The principal, Dr. Alexander Kerr, gives him an ultimatum: take your seat on the council or leave Fort Hare. Nelson chooses to leave. Think about that for a moment. Put yourself in his position. You are 21 years old. You have worked and studied and earned the right to be at this university. You have a future mapped out, modest, achievable, solid. And now the man in charge is telling you, obey or go, and you choose to go. What would you have done? Nelson returns to the great place. Chief Jongintaba is furious, blazing, quietly furious in the way dignified men get when they are truly disappointed. He orders Nelson to return to Fort Hare, to apologize, to comply, to finish his degree. And then Jongintaba delivers a second shock. He has arranged marriages for both Nelson and Justice. Good matches, he says. Fine families. It is done. Nelson and Justice look at each other. That night they make a decision. They take 2 of Jongintaba's finest cattle, prized animals, worth real money, and lead them quietly out of the pen in the dark. They sell them to a local trader. They use the money to buy train tickets. And they run. It is a betrayal. They both know it. They are stealing from the man who raised them, from the guardian who gave Nelson everything after his father died. But they are also, finally, choosing their own lives. The train carries Nelson Mandela away from the Transkei, away from the green hills and the cattle and the great meetings under the open sky, and into the city of gold. Johannesburg. Imagine arriving in Johannesburg for the first time in 1941, having grown up in mud hut villages and small mission school towns. The city is a living creature, enormous, loud, relentless, electric trams clanging through packed streets, automobiles everywhere, more cars than Nelson knew existed in the world, advertising signs in English and Afrikaans, shop windows displaying goods he has no money to buy, white men in suits striding down wide pavements, black men stepping off the pavement when white men approach, not because anyone is asking, but because the rules of this city have been absorbed into the body, into the walk, into the automatic movements of daily life. He sees gold mine headgears on the horizon, enormous steel frameworks, turning, pulling up ore from deep underground. He already knows what is beneath those turning wheels. Thousands of black men from across southern Africa, breathing dust and dynamite fumes in tunnels far underground for wages that keep them poor, while the gold makes distant shareholders rich. And he is shoved off the sidewalk, the first day, and he learns about the separate bus entrances, white door, black door, and he sees the signs, Europeans only, non-Europeans only. He already knew this country was unjust, but knowing a thing as an idea and feeling it in your body every morning are different things, very different things. He works briefly as a mine compound guard, an irony that is not lost on him. He patrols the perimeter of the compound, where thousands of men sleep in concrete barracks, far from their families. He is fired when the mining company discovers he is a runaway from the Transkei, that the telegram from Jungintaba has arrived demanding his return. He drifts to Alexandra Township, a place the locals call Dark City, because the government never bothered to electrify it. He rents a single room in someone's backyard. He sleeps on the floor. He uses a communal bucket for a toilet. The rent is almost impossible to pay. And in Alexandra, he meets Walter Sisulu. Walter Sisulu is a few years older than Nelson, stocky, compact, with the eyes of a man who has already figured out what the world is and what needs to be done about it. He works as a real estate agent serving the black community, navigating the Byzantine restrictions on where black South Africans can live. He is also an ANC man, politically active, well-connected, and constantly looking for talent. He sees something in the lanky young man from the Transkei. He sees something enormous. Sisulu hires him as a clerk. He helps Nelson complete his BA degree by correspondence. He introduces him to other activists, intellectuals, lawyers, radicals, a world of people who are not just angry about what is wrong with South Africa, but are actively, practically, strategically trying to fix it. Through Sisulu, Nelson lands an articled position at the law firm of Lazar Sidelski. He then enrolls at the University of the Witwatersrand to pursue his law degree, often the only black face in the lecture hall. Some professors ignore him. Some white students refuse to sit beside him. The library staff watches him as though he might steal something. He does not leave. At Wits, he meets the people who will stand beside him through everything to come. Joe Slovo, a fierce South African communist. Ruth First, a journalist and activist. George Bezos, a Greek immigrant who had fled Nazi-occupied Europe and who will become Nelson's most trusted legal defender for decades. And Bram Fisher, an Afrikaner from one of South Africa's oldest and most powerful white families who has looked at the world he was born into and rejected everything it asked of him. He fights for equality at a personal cost. No one should have to pay. 1944, Nelson marries Evelyn Mays, a trainee nurse, quiet and religious, a cousin of Sisulu's partner. They have 4 children, Thembi, a daughter Makaziwe, who dies heartbreakingly as an infant, Makgatho, and another daughter they name Makaziwe in memory of the first. They live in a small brick house in the township of Orlando West, with a cement floor and a galvanized tin roof, and they carry water from communal taps. It is a life, a real, ordinary, struggling, hopeful life. But Nelson is being pulled in a direction that ordinary life cannot contain, and both of them, Nelson and Evelyn, already sense it. Cliffhanger. He had a law career beginning, a family, a community of brilliant friends. And then, in 1948, the white government handed power to the most openly racist political party South Africa had ever seen. And everything changed. The word apartheid comes from the Afrikaans word for separateness. But what it built was not merely separation. It was a total system, a machine designed to keep every resource, every opportunity, every right, every good thing in white hands. And it sorted every single person in South Africa by race at birth, and that label determined everything about their life from that moment on. May 26, 1948. The National Party wins the whites-only general election. Their campaign slogan is simple and brutal: apartheid, separateness. A South Africa formally and legally organized around race, with white people at the top of everything and black people at the bottom, and a complex machinery of laws and passes and permits to make sure no one could move between those categories. Let me tell you what this means in human terms. A black family wakes up one morning to find bulldozers outside their house. Their neighborhood has been designated a white area under the Group Areas Act. They have 24 hours to leave. They go to a government office and are assigned to a township on the edge of the city. Rows of identical small brick houses with no running water, no electricity, no paved roads. This is their new home, which they did not choose and cannot leave without a pass, a small book they must carry every day, which must be signed by their employer, and which proves they have a right to be in the city. If the pass is expired, if the signature is wrong, if they forgot it at home, they can be arrested. Thousands are arrested every year. Thousands. A black child goes to school, a school underfunded by the government by design, because the architects of apartheid believe educating black children too well is dangerous. The textbooks are old and worn. There are not enough of them. The classroom has 50 students and one overwhelmed teacher. In the white school across town, the ratio is half that. The building has a science lab and a library and a sports field. A black man applies for the same job as a white man with fewer qualifications. The white man is hired. The law does not even need to say why. A black woman wants to visit her husband who works in the city. She needs a permit. The permit takes months. While she waits, her husband is sleeping in a men's hostel, in a dormitory with 40 other men, because the law does not permit him to bring his family to live near his workplace. His family grows up without him. He grows old without them. This is apartheid, not a policy, not a preference, a system, meticulously engineered, legally enforced, backed by prisons and police and guns. And Nelson Mandela, 26 years old, a law clerk, a husband, a father of young children, is watching it descend like a lid being pressed down on everything he loves. 1944, Nelson Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and the brilliant intellectual Anton Lembeda formed the ANC Youth League. The ANC, the African National Congress, has existed since 1912, sending polite petitions to a government that throws them in the bin. The Youth League is done being polite. They want mass action, boycotts, strikes, civil disobedience. They want disruption on a scale that cannot be ignored. Lembeda, fierce, visionary, tragically short-lived, teaches Nelson something that burns in him for the rest of his life. Black South Africans must believe in themselves, not wait for permission, not hope that white liberals will hand them freedom. They must seize it with both hands and carry it themselves. But Nelson also learns something that changes his strategy. In 1950, the Communist Party organizes a strike, a protest against apartheid laws. The government responds with brutal crackdowns. People die, and Oliver Tambo says to Nelson, "Today they come for the communists. Tomorrow they come for the trade unions. Then the Indian Congress. Then the ANC." Nelson understands the struggle is bigger than any one group. From now on, he takes help from wherever he can get it. 1952, the Defiance Campaign. The ANC's first mass civil disobedience movement. Volunteers deliberately break apartheid laws, walking through white-only entrances, sitting in white-only waiting rooms, refusing to produce their passbooks, and walking peacefully into the arms of waiting police officers. Nelson is appointed National Volunteer-in-Chief. He trains volunteers across the country. Be calm. Do not fight back. Fill the prisons. Make apartheid unenforceable. Make South Africa an embarrassment in front of the world. Thousands are arrested. ANC membership explodes from a few thousand to over 100,000 people. The world notices. The government does not yield. It doubles down. Nelson receives his first banning order. He cannot attend gatherings of more than 2 people. He cannot leave Johannesburg. He must report to police regularly. The government is trying to make him invisible, to reduce his world to a small box. He finds ways around the box. 1952, Mandela and Tambo law firm opens at Chancellor House in downtown Johannesburg, the first black law firm in South Africa. It is a small, hot, cramped office. It is also an act of pure defiance just by existing. Nelson and Oliver represent the dispossessed, the pass law violators, the forcibly relocated, the people who were arrested for being in the wrong place simply because their skin was the wrong color. Sometimes they work for free. The police raid the office regularly. They keep coming back. The Mandela and Tambo law firm operated for years under constant police surveillance. Officers would sit outside in unmarked cars, watching who entered. Sometimes they would come inside unannounced and demand to examine the files. Nelson and Oliver operated openly anyway. They had nothing to hide because everything about their defiance was legal. 1955, the Congress of the People at Kliptown. Nearly 3,000 delegates from across all racial communities of South Africa, black, white, Indian, colored, come together and adopt the Freedom Charter, a document that says, simply and profoundly, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, that the land shall be shared, that all shall have equal rights before the law, that education shall be free, that every person shall have the right to vote. The government calls it communist. They arrest 156 people, including Nelson Mandela, and charge them with treason. The treason trial begins and drags on for 5 years. During the treason trial, Nelson meets Winnie Madikizela. She is 22 years old, a social worker from the Transkei, and she is unlike anyone he has ever met. She walks into a room, and the room rearranges itself around her. She is beautiful and fierce, and completely, fearlessly unafraid. Not of the security police watching Nelson's office, not of the banning orders, not of the danger that has become the ordinary texture of Nelson's life. He courts her. He is still formally married to Evelyn, but he and Evelyn have been growing apart for years, divided by Nelson's consuming commitment to the struggle. He divorces Evelyn in 1958. He marries Winnie in June of the same year. Their wedding is one of the most joyful days of his life, and it is already shadowed. He has banning orders. He cannot freely move. He has no money. He has a law firm under constant police harassment. He has children he rarely sees, and now he has a wife who refuses to be afraid. They are remarkable together, complicated, passionate, dangerous. Their story will become one of the most extraordinary and ultimately one of the most painful love stories in South African history. March 21, 1960, Sharpeville. The township of Sharpeville, south of Johannesburg. Thousands of black South Africans have gathered outside the police station to peacefully protest the pass laws. They leave their passes at home deliberately, offering to be arrested en masse as an act of civil disobedience. The police open fire. 69 people are killed. 180 are wounded. Most are shot in the back. They were running away. The images go around the world. The international community is horrified. The government responds by banning the ANC and the PAC and arresting thousands. The era of legal protest is over. And Nelson Mandela, who has spent 16 years believing in peaceful resistance, believing that South Africa can be changed through law and persuasion and organized nonviolence, stands before the burning remains of that belief. Cliffhanger. The government had spoken in the only language it seemed to understand. And now Nelson Mandela had to ask himself the hardest question of his life. What do you do when your oppressor picks up a gun? After the Sharpeville massacre, the ANC leaders debate. The debate is agonizing. They are people who have committed their lives to the idea of peaceful change. They believe in democracy. They believe in the dignity of human life, all human life, including the lives of the white people who maintain apartheid. But they also believe in reality. And the reality is this: the government has guns. It is willing to use them on peaceful crowds. How many Sharpevilles is too many? The decision is made. A military wing will be formed. Its mission: sabotage, not killing. Destroy infrastructure, power pylons, railway lines, government buildings, while carefully, deliberately, intentionally avoiding civilian casualties. The goal is not military victory. That is impossible against the South African army. The goal is to raise the cost of apartheid until the government decides the price is too high to keep paying. The new organization is called Umkhonto weSizwe. In Zulu and Xhosa it means Spear of the Nation. Its abbreviation is MK. Nelson Mandela is appointed its first commander-in-chief. Think about what this means. The man who organized non-violent resistance, who trained thousands of volunteers to walk peacefully into police stations, to remain calm when arrested, to never raise a hand in anger, now has to become something else. He has to learn to think about explosions, about military organization, about a kind of violence, deliberate, targeted, controlled, that goes against everything he has spent 16 years building. Is this a betrayal of his principles, or is it the most honest response to an honest situation? He does not decide lightly. He decides because he has watched everything else fail. Nelson goes underground. The newspapers start calling him the Black Pimpernel, after the fictional French nobleman, the Scarlet Pimpernel, who kept slipping through his enemy's fingers. The name sticks. During his underground period, Nelson Mandela disguised himself as, among other things, a chauffeur, a chef, and a garden worker. He grew a beard, unusual for Xhosa men of his generation, specifically to alter his face. He became so skilled at disguise that even close friends sometimes didn't recognize him immediately. 1962, he travels secretly out of South Africa, slipping across the border in the dark, traveling north through newly independent African nations. He visits Algeria, Ethiopia, Sudan, Ghana, Senegal, Tanzania. He goes to London. He meets with ANC allies in exile, with African leaders, with international supporters. And in Ethiopia, he does something that surprises even himself. He walks through the streets of Addis Ababa, and no one cares what color he is. No one steps off the pavement when he approaches. No one reads his face for a reason to stop him. He is just a man in a city full of other men. It lasts only weeks, but he never forgets what it feels like. He knows he must go back. His place is in South Africa, with his people, in the struggle. August 1962, he is driving through the province of Natal when police cars surround his vehicle at a roadblock. He is dressed as a chauffeur, but someone has given him away. To this day, no one knows for certain who. The underground period is over. He is taken to Johannesburg and charged with leaving the country without a passport and inciting a workers' strike. At his trial, in a deliberate act of defiant pride, he defends himself while wearing a kaross, a traditional Xhosa cloak made of leopard skin, not a suit, not the costume of colonial deference. He wears his own history in that courtroom. He is sentenced to 5 years in prison. Cliffhanger. He was in prison. The government thought they had finished him. They had absolutely no idea what was coming next. Police raid Lily's Leaf Farm in Rivonia, outside Johannesburg. The farm is the secret operational headquarters of Umkhonto we Sizwe. The police find documents, plans, operational orders, evidence of the entire sabotage campaign. Most of the MK leadership is arrested. New charges are added against Nelson, already in prison, sabotage and conspiracy to violently overthrow the government. The penalty, under South African law, is death by hanging. The Rivonia trial begins in October 1963. The defendants include Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Ahmed Kathrada, and others, the moral and intellectual leadership of the liberation movement. The entire world is watching. International leaders send messages of support. Rallies are held outside South African embassies, from London to New York to Delhi. The defendants make a collective decision. They will not deny the facts. They organized MK. They planned the sabotage. They will admit it because they are not ashamed of it. And they will use this trial, this enormous platform, to put apartheid on trial in front of the entire world. April 20th, 1964. The courtroom in Pretoria. Nelson Mandela rises to give his statement from the dock. He does not take the witness stand. He speaks from the dock, a deliberate choice that means he cannot be cross-examined, but also means his words are entirely, solely, completely his own. He speaks for 4 hours. He explains the history of the ANC, how it spent 30 years begging for change through petitions and delegations before turning to mass action. He explains why peaceful resistance was tried and why it failed. He explains why sabotage was chosen, why they chose to destroy infrastructure rather than lives, and why they never targeted civilians. He explains what it means, concretely and precisely and humanly, to live under apartheid, to be told every single morning through 1,000 small laws and signs and acts of humiliation that you are less than a person. And then he reaches the end of his statement. He stands very still in the dock. The courtroom is absolutely silent, and he says, "During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." He sits down. June 11, 1964. The verdict, guilty on all charges. The sentence, life imprisonment, not death. For Nelson, in that moment, it may have felt like the same thing. He is 46 years old, he has a wife, he has children he barely sees, he has colleagues and comrades and a movement that needs him, and now he is told, you will not be part of any of it. Not for a year, not for 10 years, for the rest of your life. He is flown to Cape Town. He is put on a boat and ferried across the cold grey water of Table Bay to a small rocky island 7 kilometers offshore. Robben Island. Cliffhanger. They tried to make him disappear. They put him on an island and locked the door. What they could not have imagined, what no one could have predicted, was that the prison would become the furnace that forged the leader the world would one day stand in awe before. Imagine you are there. You are standing in cell number 5, section B, Robben Island. It is 7 feet by 8 feet, about the size of a large bathroom. The walls are concrete and they are damp, always damp, because the island is surrounded by ocean and the air carries salt and moisture that seeps into everything. The floor is bare concrete. You sleep on a thin woven mat. You have 3 blankets that smell of disinfectant. There's a bucket in the corner for waste. Every morning you carry it across the courtyard in front of the guards to empty it. This is not an accident. The humiliation is the point. The window is too high to see through, only a rectangle of sky. This is Nelson Mandela's home for the next 18 years. Every morning the prisoners are marched to the lime quarry, a pit of blinding white limestone rock. They spend hours breaking stone with picks and hammers in the full sun. The white rock reflects the light so intensely, so relentlessly, that the glare permanently damages Nelson's eyes. For the rest of his life, he will struggle with bright light. He will never be able to look at spotlights or direct sun without difficulty. He never mentions this in public. He files it away with all the other pain, in the part of himself where he stores things that will not defeat him. The hierarchy of apartheid extends even into the prison. Black prisoners receive smaller food rations than colored prisoners, who receive smaller rations than white prisoners. The government has calculated the caloric minimum required to keep a man barely functional and assigned it by race. Nelson eats his rations. He does not complain. He documents it. Nelson Mandela memorized the entire prison rulebook, every regulation, every clause, every subsection, and used it as a weapon. Whenever a guard violated a rule or failed to follow proper procedure, Nelson would calmly and quietly cite the specific regulation they had broken. Guards who bullied political prisoners found themselves facing formal complaints, filed in Nelson's precise, lawyerly handwriting that made their lives complicated. Letters, 1 letter every 6 months in the early years, later monthly, 500 words maximum, read by prison censors before delivery. Sometimes whole paragraphs are blacked out, expressions of love, references to politics, anything the authorities don't like. Nelson receives letters that are more black ink than words. He tries to read what is underneath. He writes replies, knowing they will be read by strangers before Winnie ever sees them. Visits, 30 minutes, once every 6 months, through thick glass, by telephone handset, with a guard listening on the other line. No touching, no embracing, no reaching through the barrier to take someone's hand. His daughter Zinzi, visiting as a little girl, does not recognize him at first. She reaches for the wrong man. When she realizes her mistake, her face floods with confusion. Nelson looks at her through the glass, his daughter, his child, looking at his face and not knowing it, and when the visit is over, he goes back to his cell and weeps, alone, silently, in the concrete box. He files that away too, in the same place. In 1969, Nelson's son Thembi, his firstborn son, the boy who remembered his father before prison, died in a car accident. Nelson was not permitted to attend the funeral. He received the news in his cell, delivered by a prison official. He sat alone and silent for the rest of that day. No service, no burial, no community, only a concrete wall and the echo of his own breathing. He had to grieve the death of his child in a room built to deny him everything human. But this chapter, this long, gray, suffocating chapter, is also about something else. It is about what a man can choose, even when everything has been taken from him. Nelson keeps himself physically alive. Every morning, push-ups, sit-ups, running in place, shadowboxing in the tiny space of his cell. His body remains strong because he decides it will. He keeps himself mentally alive the same way. He reads everything he can get through the prison library. History, politics, economics, literature. He studies. He thinks. He writes in a secret diary that he and his comrades bury in the garden of their exercise yard to hide it from guards. And then, slowly, beautifully, Robben Island becomes something none of the prison architects intended. It becomes a university. The political prisoners organize themselves. Anyone with knowledge teaches it. Economics, mathematics, science, history, political theory, law. They call it Robben Island University, and they are not joking. Men who arrive with no secondary school education leave with the intellectual foundations of a university degree. Nelson takes Afrikaans language classes. He already speaks Afrikaans adequately. It is hard to avoid in South Africa, but he decides to learn it properly, to read it, to understand its idioms and rhythms and poetry. His fellow prisoners look at him strangely. Why learn the language of the oppressor? Nelson says, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. He is not learning Afrikaans to accommodate his oppressors. He is learning it to understand them, to reach them, because somewhere beneath the ideology, beneath the fear, beneath the learned habits of a lifetime, he believes that human beings are capable of change. Even these ones. Even here. He begins learning the guards' names. He asks about their families, their farms, their histories. He draws parallels between Afrikaners suffering under British colonialism, real suffering, genuine historical trauma, and black South Africans suffering under apartheid. He does not lecture. He does not moralize. He listens. He asks questions. And slowly, impossibly, something shifts. James Gregory and Christo Brand, both young Afrikaner men who began as guards, agents of the system that imprisoned Nelson, find themselves changed. Brand secretly smuggles letters for Nelson. Gregory becomes something that has no official name, a man who started as a jailer and ended as something close to an ally. Brand was later invited to Nelson's inauguration as president. He came. He wept. While imprisoned on Robben Island, Nelson Mandela completed his LLB law degree by correspondence, the same degree he had first enrolled for at the University of the Witwatersrand over 30 years earlier. He received his degree in 1989 from inside prison. His prison number, 466664, became a symbol of human rights activism. He later said that earning that degree was one of the proudest moments of his life. 1982, after 18 years on Robben Island, Nelson is transferred to Pollsmoor Prison on the mainland near Cape Town. Larger cell, better food, but more isolated. The community he had built, his political university, his band of brothers, is left behind on the island. Cliffhanger. He had been locked away for 18 years. The world outside thought he was becoming irrelevant, but his name had become a battle cry on every continent on earth. And behind the scenes, something extraordinary was beginning to stir. South Africa is burning. Township uprisings have spread across the country. The government declares states of emergency. International banks refuse to lend South Africa money. International companies pull out their investments. South Africa is becoming a pariah state, isolated, sanctioned, increasingly ungovernable. President P.W. Botha, the apartheid head of state, makes an offer. He will release Nelson Mandela from prison on one condition. Nelson must publicly renounce violence. The world holds its breath. Nelson, still in prison, drafts his response carefully. He is 66 years old, and he has not spoken publicly in over 20 years. But his daughter Zinzi, the same little girl who once didn't recognize him through prison glass, is now a young woman. She carries his response to a rally in Soweto. Tens of thousands of people crowd into the space, and she reads her father's words aloud, in a voice that cracks the sky. I am not a violent man. My organization, the ANC, was not a violent organization. Let Botha show that he is different. Let him renounce violence. Let him say that he will dismantle apartheid. I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I will return. He has been in prison for 21 years. He is offered the door. He chooses to stay. Because he understands something that the government does not yet understand. that his freedom means nothing if it is given only to him. He will not walk free while his people remain imprisoned by apartheid. He will not accept a personal escape from a collective cage. What would you do? Truly, think about this for a moment. 21 years behind bars. Your children have grown up without you. Your wife has been harassed and arrested and beaten and threatened. You are 66 years old. Someone opens the door. All you have to do is say a few words. And you say no. From 1986, Nelson begins something extraordinary and risky. Secret negotiations with the South African government, without the full knowledge of the ANC in exile, without the endorsement of his comrades, alone, essentially, or nearly alone, with government officials who meet him in prison conference rooms. The risk is enormous. If the talks fail, he could be accused by his own movement of selling them out. If they succeed, if a peaceful transition is possible, he might spare his country from a civil war that would be catastrophic. He proceeds carefully. He is taking the measure of these men. Are they willing to actually give up power, or is this theater? 1989, F.W. de Klerk becomes president of South Africa. He looks at the country and sees the truth that his predecessors refused to see. Apartheid is destroying South Africa. The economy is failing. International isolation is crushing. The townships are ungovernable. Something must change. Something fundamental. He needs a partner. He needs Nelson Mandela. February 2nd, 1990. De Klerk stands before the South African Parliament. The same parliament built on apartheid. The same institution that passed every law that had crushed black South Africa for 40 years, and announces the impossible. The ANC is unbanned, the PAC is unbanned, the Communist Party is unbanned, political prisoners will be released, apartheid laws will be dismantled, and Nelson Mandela, prisoner number 46664, imprisoned for life on June 11, 1964, will walk free, unconditionally, within days. The world holds its breath. February 11, 1990, Victor Verster Prison in Paarl. Outside, thousands of people have been gathering since dawn. Television cameras from every nation on earth are pointed at the same metal gate. Journalists speak into microphones in every language. People hold signs and weep and sing. At just after 4 in the afternoon, the gate opens. Imagine you are there in that crowd. You have been waiting for this your whole life. Your parents waited. Their parents waited. You have never voted. You have carried a passbook. You have been moved from your home. You have watched your children go to schools that the government designed to keep them poor. And now, on a bright February afternoon, the most famous prisoner on earth walks through a gate, raises his right fist, and smiles. He is 71 years old. His hair is gray. His back is straight. His eyes are clear. And the crowd, the enormous weeping, singing, screaming crowd, goes absolutely apart with joy. When Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, his motorcade became instantly unable to move. The crowd was simply too vast and too overjoyed to clear a path. The journey from the prison gate to the city of Cape Town, which should have taken minutes, took hours. Standing in that crowd, people later said, was like standing inside a miracle. Cliffhanger. He was free, but South Africa was not, and the hardest battle was not behind him, it was still ahead. South Africa in 1990 is not the unified, celebrating, rainbow flag-waving country the television images suggest. It is a country in two kinds of crisis at once. On one side, a white minority government that has held total power for 40 years and is now being asked to give it up. Within that minority, there are soldiers and police and security services that have devoted their entire careers to destroying the ANC, and some of them are not willing to go quietly. On the other side, a black majority that has been waiting for justice for generations. Millions of people who are hungry and angry and who have every reason to want revenge. Young militants who were not raised on Nelson's philosophy of patience, who were raised on burning tires and tear gas and watching their friends shot in the streets. Nelson walks into this and tries to hold it together with nothing but his mind, his reputation, and his will. The violence during this period is horrific. In the black townships of KwaZulu-Natal, supporters of the ANC and supporters of the Inkatha Freedom Party are fighting and dying in numbers that make the international news. Evidence later emerges that elements of the apartheid security forces, a so-called third force, are secretly arming and directing the violence to destabilize the transition. Train massacres, township raids, political assassinations. The ground beneath the negotiations is constantly shifting, constantly crumbling. April 1993, Chris Hani is assassinated. Shot outside his home on a quiet Saturday morning by a white right-wing extremist. Chris Hani is one of the most beloved figures in the entire liberation movement. Charismatic, brilliant, deeply popular with the young militants who grew up after Robben Island. When he dies, the country comes within a heartbeat of civil war. Who holds it together in that moment? Not de Klerk, not the police, not the army. Nelson Mandela appears on national television. His voice is completely calm, his face is controlled. But if you listen very carefully, beneath the control is the weight of everything. The 27 years, the lime quarry, the children growing up without him, the son who died in a car crash while he was in prison. All of it, underneath every word. He says that South Africans must not respond to Hani's death with the violence that Hani's killers want. He says this is a moment to stand together. And South Africa, impossibly, incredibly, listens. The country does not explode. Negotiations continue. Through crises and near collapses and threats from armed white extremists and last-minute boycott threats from the Inkatha Freedom Party, the Constitution is drafted, one of the most progressive in the world. Universal suffrage, equal rights, a Bill of Rights, and a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Amnesty for truth, not perfect justice, but the price of peace. April 26, 1994. The first democratic election in South African history. Every South African, regardless of race, can vote. Lines stretch for miles from polling stations in every part of the country. People who have never voted in their lives, elderly women who walk with difficulty, old men whose hands shake, stand in the hot sun for hours. Young people take photographs of themselves, holding ink-stained fingers up to the sky. Nelson Mandela votes for the first time in his life. He is 75 years old. He stands in a polling booth, holds a ballot paper, and makes a mark. A simple mark. And when he emerges, the photographers capture his face, and the smile on it is not the smile of a man who has won a competition. It is the smile of a man who has finally, after everything, been recognized as a full human being. The ANC wins 62.6% of the vote. The era of apartheid is over. Cliffhanger. He had been a prisoner, an outlaw, a symbol, a negotiator. Now he was about to become something none of his enemies had ever believed possible, the President of South Africa. May 10th, 1994. The Union Buildings in Pretoria. The Union Buildings. The seat of the very government that sentenced Nelson Mandela to life in prison. The seat of apartheid itself. Today, dressed in the colors of a new flag, green and gold and black and white and red, it hosts his inauguration. 91 heads of state attend. Princes and presidents, prime ministers and kings from every corner of the globe. They have all come to this same hilltop to watch a man who was a prisoner become a president. Nelson stands in the South African sunlight. He is 75 years old, his hair is silver, his suit is perfect. He places his hand on a Bible and takes the oath of office. His voice is steady and clear. It is the voice of a man who has been rehearsing for this moment for his entire life. Though he never knew, through the years in the quarry and the cell and the negotiations, exactly what this moment would look like. South African Air Force jets streak overhead, trailing smoke in the colors of the new flag. Some of those pilots are black, a sight that would have been illegal just a decade before. In his inaugural address, Nelson speaks of a rainbow nation, of healing, of a covenant, a promise between all of South Africa's people, across all their differences, to build something new, something that has never existed here before. He says, "We enter into a covenant that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall, without any fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity." The crowd erupts. People weep, black people and white people and people of every background and color, weeping together, which is something South Africa has almost never seen. At his inauguration, Nelson Mandela reserved seats of honor in the front rows for 3 of his former prison guards from Robben Island, men who had once had total authority over every hour of his life, the men who had watched him carry his waste bucket across the courtyard sat in the best seats at his greatest triumph. He later said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Now watch what he does as president. Watch, because this is where the story becomes almost impossible to believe. He forms a government of national unity and appoints members of the National Party, the party that built apartheid, to his cabinet. He asks white generals to command the new integrated military. He personally calls Percy Yutar, the prosecutor who, at the Rivonia trial, had asked for Nelson's death by hanging, and invites him to lunch. He visits the widow of Hendrik Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid itself, and has tea with her in her sitting room. These are not naive acts. These are strategic acts rooted in something profound, a belief that reconciliation, genuine reconciliation, is more powerful than revenge, that a country built on the rubble of defeated enemies cannot stand, that a country built on the difficult, uncomfortable, imperfect work of mutual recognition might. 1995, the Rugby World Cup. South Africa hosts the tournament. The Springbok rugby team is almost entirely white. Rugby has been the sport of the white minority. The Springbok jersey, for most black South Africans, is a symbol of apartheid, of a country that excluded them. Before the final, Nelson Mandela puts on a Springbok jersey, number 6, the captain's jersey, and walks onto the field. The crowd, predominantly white, the crowd that has always supported the Springboks, the crowd that once voted for the National Party, looks at this old black man in their green jersey, and they begin to chant, "Nelson, Nelson, Nelson." South Africa wins the final. The country goes briefly, miraculously, deliriously, beautifully, won. His personal life in these years holds its own quiet grief. His marriage to Winnie has been coming apart for a long time. The years of separation, the different paths their struggles took them down, the impossibility of rebuilding intimacy through prison glass. They separate in 1992 and divorce in 1996. It is painful. He never stops loving her, in the way you never stop loving someone who was forged alongside you in fire. But some things cannot be put back together. In July 1998, on his 80th birthday, he marries Graça Machel, the widow of Mozambique's former president, a woman of extraordinary dignity and warmth. She brings him something he has almost forgotten: peace, ordinary, daily, human peace. 1999, he steps down. He does not have to. He has the power to remain. Millions would cheer if he declared himself president for life, but he hands the presidency peacefully to Thabo Mbeki and walks away. In a continent where power sharing and term limits are routinely ignored by leaders who believe they are indispensable, Nelson Mandela demonstrates something radical, that no one is indispensable, that democracy requires that leaders leave when their time is done. It is perhaps the most revolutionary thing he ever does. Cliffhanger. He had done what no one thought was possible. He had led a country through the fire without letting it burn down. Now, in his last chapter, the world would discover what it means to have loved someone like this, and to begin to lose them.